Good morning and welcome to this edition of our MacroPro and Friends webinar. My name is Graciela Ojeda with MacroPro and I am with my co-host Drew Davis. Good morning, Drew. How are you?
Good morning, Graciela. I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. It's hard to believe that a year ago today we had our last in-person MacroPro and Friends event in Long Beach.
I know, I just can't believe that we've literally been locked down for a year now. But I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I think things are starting to look better, but it has definitely been a long run considering we've all been locked up.
It sure has been a crazy 12 months. Well, let's get started. For any of you who may not be familiar with MacroPro, we are a document retrieval company. We secure records for your claims and litigated files. Regardless of where your records are, we can get them for you. So, Drew, will you please go over a few of our housekeeping items before we start?
Absolutely, Graciela. So I know that everybody's probably wondering, how am I going to get my certificate? So please know and please listen to this portion because in order to receive a certificate, you must make sure that you log into the GoToWebinar platform. You cannot get a certificate by just calling in. You must register through the platform. And within 24 hours, you will receive an email from GoToWebinar with your certificate. You cannot reach back out to myself or Graciela because we don't issue the certificates, GoToWebinar does, so please make sure to check any spam or junk folders to see if you've received that certificate. Also, I want to make sure that everybody knows if they have any questions, they can use the chat feature. I will be monitoring the chats throughout the presentation. And if for any reason somebody misses the presentation or they want to refer the presentation to a colleague, you can definitely go and check out our MacroPro YouTube page where you can see this presentation. So with that, Graciela, would you like to introduce our speakers?
Yes, thank you, Drew. I'm excited to introduce our two speakers this morning, Diane Cohen and Chris Champlin. So Diane Cohen is the Vice President of Client Relations. She has been with MacroPro since 1988. Diane is responsible for setting up our educational department. Diane is a speaker, author, and host of online chats, which are interviews with the litigation and claim experts. She is also a founder, good morning, Diane, of many associations, such as the Association of Workers' Compensation in Sacramento, formerly Women in Work Comp, PIWC, Combined Claim Conference in Northern California, as well as many others. You might know Diane because she is a frequent speaker at many of our conferences, such as CompLaw People's Choice Award, the California Organization of Self-Insured Plan Administrators, and Making Workers' Compensation Work, just to name a few. She was also recognized by WorkCom Central for her contributions in the industry. Good morning, Diane.
Good morning, and thank you for the lovely introduction.
Great, and now I will introduce Chris Chaplin. Good morning, Chris. Chris is the CEO of C&W Claim Solutions, a nationally recognized background investigation firm. He has over 15 years experience in the insurance defense industry. Before entering the private sector, Chris was a decorated peace officer in Northern California for over 10 years and served on active duty with the United States Marine Corps Fleet Anti-Terrorism Unit during the First Gulf War. Wow. As well as being in the United States Army as a combat engineer following 9/11. Well, good morning, Chris.
So old, Graciela. I'm only 39. Thank you.
I know, it seems just like a year ago, we began learning how to use Zoom to put on meetings for our clients and get in touch with them. Remember those days? Mic on, camera on, pants on.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for a beautiful introduction.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Well, Diane, are you ready to talk about what doctors have to say?
I am. We've got a lot to cover today.
All right, and you could see my screen, okay? You got that right? Okay, perfect. Well, yeah, thank you, everybody. Before, Graciela and Drew were going over things, I was looking at the attendee list, and I'm really happy to see so many people and so many familiar names. This last year, Diane, what was it, a year ago today, we were in Long Beach doing this live, weren't we?
Yeah, and right after the conference, they shut us down and had to stay at, shelter in place order. So I think we're ready for this conference and doing multiple educational units like we have in the past.
It was funny, Diane and I called each other and said, hey, it's been 14 days, we're fine, after we were flying out of Long Beach. It's funny, I have the news on here in my office, and they're talking about the 1-year anniversary today. We're ready to move on, and to the point was, I'm ready to see all of you in person one of these days. With that, let's talk about doctors. Let's talk about what we're going to talk about today mainly is what doctors are saying out there. And here at CNW, we have other interests. We've got some doctors that we know of that we have an opportunity to speak with, and I posed this question to them. I said, what is it you need? What really makes a difference when you're looking at a file, when you get all this information? And, it's ironic, medical doctors rely on medical evidence, right, Diane? I mean,
That's simple.
Determination. What do they need?
They need all the information in the medical file so that they can determine the true value of the claim, whether or not it's compensable, not compensable, whether or not it's an exaggerated claim. They need to get the evidence inside of the records to be able to determine that.
Right, that's exactly it. They need medical evidence to determine everything Diane just said. So how do you get that evidence? And so what we're going to do today, what we're hoping you will all understand is how to go about getting the evidence you need and then using the evidence. Not only finding it, verifying it's the right person, but then sending it to your primary treating physician, sending it to your med legal department. Whatever you have going on, get it quickly and use it. So what I want to talk about today is something that here at CMW we have coined as the MRI. As you heard, I'm a military guy. I love my acronyms. So, and your son's in the Marines. He would understand, right, Diane?
Yes, absolutely.
We love our acronyms here in this industry. I mean, I off topic a little bit. I received a claim file note from a client, and it said EE was at the ER, suffered a CT. So I had to go through and put together a cipher log of what all these different acronyms mean when I turn it over to my investigators. Injured worker, employer, CT claim. So we love our acronyms.
So what is MRI as far as investigations are concerned?
It's our version of a medical record search. And what we do here is we take the information that we've developed during a background investigation and apply that to our medical record searches. So as we're looking for records, we will use name, address, date of birth, social, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute because it is a very underutilized tool in the industry. And I hate to coin the saying now more than ever, and Diane is going to talk about that here in a bit around COVID. This is the kind of data, this is the kind of intel you need now more than ever to shut down a claim, to determine compensability, or to determine if it's a pre-existing non-industrial or if it's a pre-existing injury. So we call medical record investigations. So why is this important, and when should it be done? Again, you're going to identify prior injuries right away. Could be off of a social media page. It could be off of index, ISO, EDEX, and AIMS. You see our lingo here. And this way you can help your client mitigate their exposure to the file. The old Monday morning came to work, has a sprain. There are objective findings, but there's really no way to determine if the injury actually occurred at work on Monday or did it happen over the weekend. And a lot of people are posting stuff to social media that uncovers that. As you can see on the screen here, it's more cost effective than traditional investigations. When I was doing SIU work years ago, they would say, we need surveillance. And I go, okay, great. Why? We want to show that he has a prior injury. Wonderful. That's not what surveillance is for. Surveillance is not going to identify a prior injury. Surveillance is going to identify current activities, current restrictions, limitations, things like that. If you want to identify prior records, this is the way you go.
Basically, it's a medical suite.
It's a medical sweep, in essence, yeah. It's a medical sweep. It's a medical canvas, a medical sweep, a medical search, a medical canvas, you know,
well,
whatever you
a lot of information can be yielded from one. And so this is really a great tool to be able to utilize to find evidence that you may not have access to otherwise.
That's right. And lastly, as you saw in our previous slide, medical experts rely on medical evidence. It makes a tremendous amount of difference in the eye of your physicians, in the eye of your primary treaters, the eyes of your med legal. So that's a little bit briefly about claim search or a medical record search is. So hypothetically speaking, Diane, we found the records. We found records that go back prior to the date of injury for, guess what, the exact same injury. So what should we do, Diane?
I think we should go get those records. Let's get those records and let's find out what's in them, right?
That's right. Why shouldn't we, right? Let's go get them. So let's talk about getting those records.
Absolutely. So the one thing we want to keep in mind is that your copy service, whoever you utilize, is a partner in your defense. And if we look at the next slide, I want to go to the next slide. These are things that they should be doing for you in order to really help you out and make your life easier and provide you with information to provide to your doctors, because there are things that they can find in discovery. For example, the discovery tools that they have available to you would include, for example, have they ever copied records on this person before? Call them up, say, hey, have you ever copied records on this person before? They should be able to tell you within the last 3 years that they have. And the information that you're going to find is like, it's gold, right? You might find a location, you'll get the number of pages, when the records were copied. So now you have someplace else to go to get these records that you may not have known about before, because, you know, sometimes injured workers forget places that they've been seen and where they've been treated. I know that I don't remember everything perfectly anymore. So there's a wealth of information that they can provide right out of their own system. They should do a film breakdown for you. Okay, you know you want to get x-rays of the knee, and that's going to be really good for the doctor to look at, right? But what else would be good for the doctor? All of the x-rays. Not that you need a copy of them, but if you have a breakdown of all of the x-rays that have this person's have, whether it's an MRI, a CT scan, whatever the case is, these studies may be very important to the doctor, because he may say one thing may have aggravated another, right? So maybe you don't own this claim completely, but most importantly, they don't hand out these type of studies, right? There has to be a medical reason for that. And if there was, then the doctor should be privy to this information when they're doing your evaluation for you. So get a breakdown of all the films, and your document retrieval company should do that for you. They should provide, yes.
Sorry, go ahead. I have a question when you're done.
All right, they should provide to you a free eDex. This is going to tell you whether or not they've ever had a former workers' compensation claim, and it should be free to you, right? They're just going to be able to provide that information so that you know what any prior conditions or injuries may have happened on the job. And then they should have some helpful tools for you. You've gotten your doctor's evaluation. He's giving you a whole person evaluation or amount. They should have a tool like a disability PD rater for you, so that you can put the information in. It should be available to you to put in multiple body parts, so you know exactly what it is worth. You know whether or not you should add 15% or minus 15% based on the time period. So your document retrieval company should be your best friend when it comes to getting discovery. They should have a lot of discovery tools available to you. Your question, Chris?
Yes. you can count how many pages of medical records? Because I think that's kind of a topic here in California now, isn't it?
Yeah, actually it is. They are looking at trying to make sure that the duplications are taken out of the medical records before sent to the doctor. And this is something that the state of California is working on. And of course, those of us that are phenomenal copy services, we're all working on that already.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute, because that was another thing that came up with physicians, is that they get all these records and it's the same person, or different people with the same name. And
Yes.
I have one more question for you, Diane. In years past, Drew and I have done a presentation similar to this, and he mentioned something about a chiropractor. You guys went out and got medical records, and there was an erasure form or something.
Yeah, so I passed out $100,000 bars, candy bars, for a long time because of this. We actually had one of our field reps where was doing what he was doing. He was out copying records, and there was an erasure in the file. And so he picked up the phone. He was honest. He says, "Hi, this is Bob with MacroPro. I see your phone number. I just want to confirm that you treated, injured worker XYZ. Yes, we did. And it's so horrible what happened to him. He was pulling the stump out of the backyard, and he wrenched his back, so badly. Well, we were copying records at a different chiropractor. That was his regular chiropractor. He did not give the examiner that information, but because there was an erasure in the file, we were able to find that medical evidence and provide it to the doctor, so that and to the examiner, so they were able to utilize it in their claim.
Diane, having been a cop and all that, it never surprises me when I hear stories like that. These people, they have good jobs, they have medical benefits. Why lie? If you got hurt at work, if you got hurt at home, why lie about it? God, it's just amazing.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So we get this question a lot, and I mentioned it in our introduction earlier. So, they go, "Chris, what exactly are you looking for when you're searching for records?" One of our physicians asked the staff the other day, he said, "What is it you're looking for? What is it that you think would make a difference when you're trying to find treatment outside of the work comp claim?" Well, I'm glad you asked, and I am going to tell you just a few things. The first thing we try to identify is, did the name match? Did the provided name that was on your first report of injury, or 5020, depending on where you're at, does that match the name that's on that form? This becomes semi-complicated when you're dealing with different structures of surnames or ethnicities. When you're making those initial 3-point calls, if you're sending somebody out to do an AOE COE interview, really hone in on the name, but more importantly, find maiden names. I'm going to show you a slide here in a minute. People that have been married multiple times or received treatment under a different name. For instance, my wife chose to keep her maiden name. And so now I'm known as Mr. Greenstreet when I take the car into the service center. Not my medical records, thankfully, but when other things, I just roll with it. Hey, it's cool. But keep that in mind. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. That's one of the things we're looking for when we start the process of a medical record search, is validate that the name matches, and what other names are they using. For instance, here's a good example of Connie.
Yeah.
Now, Connie's been married a lot. Now, Diane, you've been married a lot too, haven't you?
8 times.
8 times. 8. God, how many last names do you have now, Diane?
I have just the 2 original, my birth last name, and the 8 times that I married the same man. Last name is Cohen. So, unlike others, who marry multiple husbands, I just keep marrying the same guy over and over.
God bless you. That's awesome. Well, Connie likes to marry a lot of different guys. And
yes.
As we were preparing to do our medical record search, we wanted to make sure that we had every single one of her last names. Because that's critical when we call these facilities and go, "Hey, I am looking for records for Connie, Bear, Jones, Manley, Ritter, Baser, whatever." But Diane, tell our audience why knowing this is also important in the beginning.
Well, let's say Connie had an injury at work, and perhaps she has a new employer, and they only know her by this one last name. If they wanted to get records prior to her marriage of maybe 2 years, they wouldn't be able to secure that without getting a last name and typically 3 other pieces. I should say there are 3 pieces of information that they usually have to use to identify a person. So, you know, first name, last name, date of birth, last 4 Social Security, or an address, something that would help identify who she is. Well, if Connie has different last names, they're going to think, well, this isn't the right person, so they're not going to necessarily release that information. So it's really, really important to find out whether or not the person has ever been married before. It's an uncomfortable question for some people, if to ask them, oh, have you ever been married before? Yeah, why do you need to know that? You know, and the thing is you just want to be truthful with them and say, look, I need to gather all of your medical records so that, you know, we can provide it to our doctors to evaluate. It's not really a big deal if you just approach it very just matter of fact. You know, you're talking to somebody and you ask them, you know, during the 3-point contact, you know, what is your last name? Great. Is that your married name? Is that a maiden name? That's my maiden name. Okay, great. Are you married? Yep. Okay. Do you ever use your married name? Or perhaps you could say, yeah, I've been married before. What was that last name? It's really important to have those different last names so that we can gather the information.
Well, and more importantly, Diane, when they're filling out some forms, if they have to fill out a HIPAA release form or a general release form, or you have to issue a subpoena for medical records, is a facility going to turn information over to you if you don't have these other names written in on those forms, signed by either the claimant or, you know, through a subpoena?
Yeah, without the AKA, typically they're not going to release that information. So we want to make sure that, you know, we have as much information as possible for the custodian, because custodians are people. They want to do a great job and they don't want to release information that that's not supposed to be released. So if the last names don't match, and maybe, you know, they have different address than they had before, and that doesn't match either, they're going to absolutely assume this is the wrong person.
In speaking of custodians of record, you know, when we call a facility, you know, again, it's very important to ask the right questions. When I call Sutter Health here in Sacramento, you know, I'm asking for the record division, and we generally say something to the effect of, you know, hi, my name is Chris. I'm calling on behalf of Broadspire. We've been asked to find some records. We have a subpoena here, or a release form. And we don't want to waste your time or ours. And we're trying to make sure to see if this individual, last name with all these AKAs, address, social, date of birth, whatever, has records. And as Diane said, they are so much more appreciative if you come at them that way, because then they can say, yeah, you know what? No, we don't. Great, thank you. That way we're not wasting your time. We're not wasting our clients' time. We're not wasting Diane, MacroPro's time, sending them out to places that don't have the right records. So you see how a name is so critical and important to identify at the very beginning so that you can do things down the road.
Right.
And here's a prime example. Again, this is a real quote, but after receiving all the medical records for the QME and having their office sort through them, during the appointment, they learned that the records were of the same name, but the wrong person. And so, again, going back to the name, not only should you know the name of the individual and all the names they've used, but what about all the different dates of birth? What about their social security numbers? We were asked, what about phone numbers? We called a facility in LA the other day, and they said, hey, what phone number do you have on file for the claimant? And they were able to look them up with that. So if you can identify 2 or 3 key pieces of data, you are guaranteed to know that that is in fact the same person. Now, Diane, you had an experience with this just recently, didn't you?
I did. So I'm sitting at the doctor's office, and the nurse is Mrs. Cohen. And Mrs. Cohen said, yes, I'm here. And I said, I'm here. And they said, oh, Diane Cohen. And Mrs. Diane Cohen says, I'm here. And I said, I'm here too. They said, oh, that's interesting. Well, Diane Cohen seeing Dr. X. And both of us at the same time said, oh, that's me. So finally, they had to look in the file for the date of birth to figure out which one of us was going to see the doctor. Now, what are the chances that there are 2 Diane Cohens going to see the same exact doctor, you know, one appointment behind the other? You wouldn't think it's that often. but there are millions of people here in the United States, and we are a transient community now, right? Used to be you were born in a location and you died somewhere near there, you know, within 50 miles of your birthplace. Not anymore. People travel and they move, so the chances are much greater than they used to be. And so we want to make sure we get as much information as possible so we get the right records for you, because a document retrieval company is only as good as the information they are given, and the custodian is only going to be able to provide the information based on what the examiner provides to us.
That's amazing. You know, what are the chances? And that was here in Sacramento, right?
Yeah, it was.
Wow. So did you guys have any connection whatsoever? I mean, that's a interesting story. Did you guys have any family history or anything?
No, Cohen is the Smith of the Jewish community. So, you know, we're probably related somewhere back in Egyptian time or something.
I think we're all related somehow, I know. All right. Well, let's keep going. So again, what information are you looking for when you're doing a medical record search to provide over to your copy service? Again, social security number. Do they have more than one? Is it a match to the name? Is it a match to the date of birth? All of this, again, going back to what we were talking about, is going to make a tremendous difference to verify you have the right individual, or you find records on the right individual under aliases, AKAs, various socials, or dates of birth. Additionally, when you run an ISO index search, by using the the right social security number, you're going to get a lot more. You know, you've got I just did one this morning, provided number isn't a match. 7 other people are using the same provided number. So when you run an ISO index search, you're going to get 7 other people's information. Now you got to sort through that and determine, okay, is this my guy or not my guy? Is this an alias? Is this not an alias? What have I got here? Here's an example. This is Maria. We got the provided SSN, but it's not associated to her. It's associated to a gentleman named Sean. But then we noted that Maria was also going by multiple different names: Gonzalez, Contreras, Delfug, Barajas. Sorry, yes, it did identify spelling issues there. But Maria has used multiple variations and dates of birth that correlate with those alternate social security numbers. So once again, when we're calling Sutter Health and I tell them my spiel, we're looking for records on a Maria Gonzalez. She has 5 social security numbers that we believe are associated to her and 4 different dates of birth. How would you like us to start here? And again, they're very helpful. They're very willing to say, okay, let's see what we got. What was a particular interest with you? Go ahead, Diane.
I was going to say, you know, it's interesting because you were mentioning the names. Sometimes the names, like with Diane Cohen and I, sometimes it's a matter of asking and not assuming the spelling of a name. So, you know, if I had a claim, we would, and the examiner put me down as D-I-A-N-E, I mean, that would be an assumption that would be completely reasonable, but it would be incorrect. And so it is important that we ask, is it common spellings? It's like Stephen, is it with a V or a PH? We want to make sure that we narrow down that information, that is free and quick information to ask while we're on the phone and discussing these things. Just because somebody transmits something to us, it doesn't mean the information on that document is correct. So before we send out the information to have a medical sweep done by you or provided to a document retrieval company to gather records, let's make sure that we verify the spelling, because that already is going to help narrow down the search.
No, that's exactly correct. What's of interest with this particular file is we were the second company to have gotten involved in it. Initially, they sent out a copy service, so it wasn't MacroPro, to go get some records along a coastal community in Southern California. And they did. They got records on a Maria Gonzalez, and they sent those medical records in to the primary treating physician. And he said, it's not her, wrong person. So we got involved, we did a background, and we found out that our Maria Gonzalez had no connection to that area. And so therefore, there was no way those records were ever hers, because it would have, you know, it's a 3-hour drive where she was treating. based on where she lived. And that's when we got involved and we found these various socials and dates of birth. And, you know, you can notice typos. I've noticed just looking at this, because I get this question a lot. Well, how do you know if they're using that number or not? And if it's not a typo or if it's not done intentionally, take a look at the last two numbers there under the social. 8-5 versus 7-5. It's got the first three numbers are the same and the last four numbers are the same. But what they did is they changed up the middle numbers. Was that intentional or not? I don't know. Same with the last two dates of birth, 2/29/80 or 2/09/80. Okay, that looks more like a typo to me than it would be intentional. Somebody dropped the two. But this is the kind of information that's going to help you get the records you need and verify they are of the right person. So Diane and MacroPro can go out and get the right information. Valid address. You know, this never ceases to amaze me, this question. Again, I think medical record searches are completely underutilized. And that's why we're trying to get this, you know, we're doing this. Think about your CT claims, all right? Let's not look at where they're living now, but let's look at where they were living 6, 7, 8 years ago when you started the CT claim. Because you're not going to find, if they've moved 5 or 6 times, you're not going to find what you're looking for to help you mitigate your claim. You need to look at the totality of their address history and start searching in the back, you know, go back in time and start your searches there. Urgent care clinics, emergency rooms,
Pharmacy.
Yeah, you know, my business partner, he has a favorite line that he likes to say, let's run water through the pipes first to find the leaks. So we haven't started the pharmacy searches yet, but there is a wealth of information out there from pharmacies. That will be being rolled out in phase 2. But I agree, pharmacies. And the beautiful thing too with a lot of these facilities is they're centralized. Walmart, Safeway, you know, all of your big named pharmacies, Costco, they all use a central database. So you only have to really call one facility and they can look it up across, I think, the country, if not that region, which is really time, saves a lot of time for us because, you know, you only have to call one. Little tip of the day, CHP is the same way. You can call your local CHP office to get police reports now. And they can get them anywhere in the country. It's fabulous. And you know, with COVID and less FaceTime, more and more companies are kind of getting in line with this, which is really incredible. But yeah, a valid address, because you're going to want, we're all creatures of habit. And some of you may have heard me say this before. Diane, and you probably agree. We all go to the same grocery store. We all probably go to the same Starbucks in the morning. I know I do. I got about 2 of them though, but I generally hit either one depending on where I'm at. We all use the same medical facilities or urgent care centers if we have kids. We find one we like, we keep using it, right, Diane?
Absolutely. You know, there's something about being comfortable and having a comfort level with where we're going.
Yeah. So, for instance, here's an example of one that we were asked to do a medical record search on. And during the search of prior claims, the adjuster had done a 3-point contact. She had asked all these questions. Have you ever been injured before? The guy obviously said no, never been hurt before, never been injured. So she ran an index report. We ran an AIM search, and we identified multiple claims, multiple injuries, same body parts, car accidents. I mean, this guy he was tore up from the floor up. He was a mess. So what we did is we put together, you know, an approach to identify prior records by using the date ranges that correlated with all of those injuries. We came up with 3 addresses. So we started making calls, and guess what? We found records. But we also were able to rule out places that we didn't need to go, and we'll be talking about that next. So this is Karen. And as you guys heard earlier, I'm sure you've already gotten a Karen or two who says, why do you need all my information? Diane, you touched on this again, but again, could you explain to our audience here, why do you need that? Why do you need to know?
Well, here's the thing. I know that there are those really uncomfortable questions that we have to ask our injured workers from time to time. And if we make a matter of fact, it'll be less uncomfortable for all of us. But the thing is when they're objecting to the fact, why do you need to know if I've been married before? Why do you need to know if I've lived in a different state or a different town or whatever the case is? And the best way to put them at ease is by telling them, because we want to pay you everything you're entitled to. What? You want to pay me everything I'm entitled to? What, that all of a sudden opens up the idea that, you're working with them, you're working for them, which we are. I mean, our duty in this business is to make sure that the injured worker is made whole. Not every injured worker is somebody that is going to tell us a lie, is not going to tell us the truth. There are so many of them that are such a legitimate claim. And by putting them at ease and saying, look, we want to pay you everything you're entitled to, so we have to gather all of the medical evidence that we can so that our doctors can evaluate it and we can put a dollar amount on this for you. And I think that really is very helpful, because then they understand that you're not trying to spy on them. You're trying to give them what they're entitled to.
So Diane, I did get a question. Somebody sent me a text. And I don't know if now is a good time to talk about this, or maybe if we have time at the end, I'll bring it up. Okay.
Well, I mean, you're welcome to ask the questions now. And if anybody else has any questions, please type them in, and Chris and I are happy to answer them.
Well, here's the question. Somebody asked, can you ask Diane about the new fee schedule and the signed affidavit declaration saying medical record page count? If QMEs don't have that declaration, they won't be paid for reviewing the medical records.
That is a topic in itself. So why don't you give me that person's information and I will call them offline, because we do only have a certain amount of time and I want to answer that for them as sufficiently as possible.
Okay, will do. Well, there we go. Good timing. Our office received additional medical records 3 days after the scheduled med legal appointment. So our QME was unable to review them prior. As you just heard in that question, Diane, you take the medical records and you truncate them down. You pull out duplicates and count the pages right. And we all try.
We're all working on that. That's not something that most copy services do at this point, but it is something that it is becoming a hot button, and it is something that we are all working on, getting our systems together so that we can get rid of duplicates.
That's exactly it. And it's also, you want to get them to them prior to your med legal appointment.
Yes.
And that's kind of what we're talking about here, is you want to do this right away. Don't wait until, first of all, you only have, I believe it's 1 year for the HIPAA release form, and you talk about that here in a minute. You want to get this ball rolling as soon as you can. Let's not wait, because as you're completing these authorization forms, which Diane's going to talk about here, if you have the form, use it. Get the records. You might not need them, but when you do, you can get them to your people in a timely manner.
Now, so I would like to add to that. This is 1 year anniversary of our pandemic, and I have to tell you that everything has slowed down. So it's not necessarily the fault of a document retrieval company that the QME didn't get their records timely. There are many facilities, for example, doctors that are still treating patients, but they don't have any back office staff. So they're not providing records. You could subpoena them, you can have an authorization form, but they don't have anybody back there to do the work. And they're not going to allow a document retrieval company in because of the COVID and trying to make sure everybody's safe that is in their office working. They're not going to invite a stranger in to do that work for them. The other thing is there's a large pharmacy that so many people get prescriptions from, and when we are trying to get records for them, they are just working on May of last year's subpoenas and records request. So everything is slowed way, way, way down. Some of their larger facilities obviously are much more sophisticated and they're able to do and get records faster, but we are waiting a very long time for many facilities to release records, and it's just because of COVID. So just be patient with what's going on out there. All right, so the next screen is who should fill out this authorization form? Well, the answer is and always should be that it should be the claims examiner. Why? Because these authorization forms can be quite difficult, and you need to dot your I and cross your T to make sure that the facility does not reject them. Oftentimes, a facility like we're looking at Social Security and VA records, military records, those can be quite daunting, those authorization forms, and you want to make sure that you read every line, you provide it to them exactly they want. We're used to doing, you know, a date, month, year. They might ask for a year, month, and day. So you want to make sure that's all right, because if it's not, believe it or not, something as small as that can get your authorization form rejected. So do yourself a favor, fill it out for your fill out the authorization, regardless of how easy or hard it is for your injured worker. If they have any questions, you certainly can explain to them why you need this information, but it'll make your life a lot easier. Let's talk a little bit about why you want to use an authorization form as opposed to a subpoena. So the biggest reason to use an authorization form is because with that, there's no waiting periods. We're not waiting 20 days to be able to have a production date to get records like we do with a subpoena. So we're going to waive that. We're able to collect our records faster, which is wonderful. In addition to that, the authorization form has a duration date on it. And with proper dating of that, you can prolong the use of your authorization form. You're not going to date it out 20 years. Nobody's going to want to sign that because it's going to feel like an invasion of privacy. But it is not unheard of let's see the word I'm looking for. It's not unusual to be trying to extend that out a little bit longer if the injury is a little bit more on the catastrophic side and it's a big injury. So if you put it out 3 to 5 years, nobody's going to think anything about it because we know that there's going to be ongoing treatment. So let's date that properly and let's make that authorization form a bit longer than just the 1 year. It's not 1 year unless nobody puts a time period in, then we put that in. But let's get that in there. They could sign it and prove for that. In addition to that, if the claim gets closed, we want to be able to utilize that again when it reopens. So if it gets reopened, we have an authorization form that was good for 3 years. Now we can go and get updated records, for example. We don't have to go through the whole rigmarole of getting everything signed or using a subpoena. We've got something we can start working with immediately. And then lastly, it's just more cost effective. There's more costs involved with the subpoena. So let's save ourselves some money. And as a reminder, let's get that authorization form signed right from the get-go so you can start using it as soon as that medical history form is returned. The other thing we want to talk about is ditching our medical authorization forms. We get so many requests for records that have nothing to do with the medical issues. And you want this information, but you didn't have anything but a medical authorization form signed. So let's ditch that. Let's use a multi-purpose authorization form. And Chris, if we look at the next slide here, this is just going to give you an idea of what a multi-purpose authorization form is going to do for you. It's going to not only get you medical records, because you are going to need those, but it'll get you employment records, it'll get you scholastic records, insurance records. And we actually got records from the penitentiary because somebody had been imprisoned and they had gone to the facilities there, and so we needed to get those medical records. So there are so many different ways that you can use an multiple authorization form. So let's extend the breadth of our authorization form and use something that's got real teeth, and we don't have to keep going back to the injured worker to get signed.
And Diane, what's again, you know, we've been talking about this now. Look what's on the top of that form. Name of patient, other names used, date of birth, last four of the social. Those 3 criterias, you need to get everything, have all that information available to you. And so you can make it available to whoever you're trying to get the record from.
Obviously that space is really small, so you can give an attachment with the other names. So, okay, let's talk about subpoena, because we talked about authorization form. Let's talk a little bit about a subpoena. Used to be we can only subpoena records within California, but now we can subpoena records outside of California. And when I say we, I mean outstanding document retrieval companies. They know how to utilize the UIDD, or the Interstate Deposition and Discovery Act. So they could get records from other states for you, and we don't have to like hope and pray that somebody's going to use a California authorization form to release. We can now do it where it's legal and binding. So the next slide is a picture of a map. And on that map, everything in kind of this bluish purple color, periwinkle, let's call it, those are all states that are participating. So we are easily able to subpoena records in those locations. The places in yellow do not participate in that. However, that doesn't mean that we can't get those records there. What it does mean is that we have to jump through a little bit more hoops. Some of the states require that we utilize an attorney locally in their states and their jurisdictions in order to get the subpoena done. Fine, okay, great. Others require us to jump through more hoops. It is more work, it's a little bit more money, but the truth of the matter is this: one page in a medical document that has some really good information on it can make or break your claim. So it's worth the additional money to be able to gather that information and get it. And you can get it now legally. You're not having to try to beg for records. We can now get it for you legally and using a subpoena.
So Diane, I just got a question about our medical record searches asking, said, Chris, do you guys search outside of the state of California? And the answer to that is yes. We have the ability to conduct a nationwide search by using people here in California to call facilities throughout the country where we've identified records. And that what kind of makes Diane and I a good partner here in what we do. Not only can we identify records out of state, but as they're looking at this screen here, they can go get it. So thank you for that question. So, you know, I've worked on both sides of the fence here. I've done SIU, I've done surveillance, I've done statements. And so, you know, I'm partial to the investigation world, obviously. But one of the things that we've heard from physicians is unless the surveillance video is just truly sensational and clearly identifies the injured worker, it's not going to make much of a difference. I've been subpoenaed to testify on identity of an injured worker. When we got tremendous video of the person, the doctor, for some reason, said, I can't tell that's him. I brought in a big screen TV and I zoomed in, and the doctor still would not say that's him. And I had to sit there and go, we ran the guy's plate. We used the guy's address. Here's his picture. Like you said, it was very challenging to get this doctor to go, all right, I guess that's the guy. But still, what he's doing, you know, doesn't make much of a difference. So unless it's truly sensational, unless it's easy for the doctor to review, and that's the other thing, you know, you're asking your doctors to review all this film, you might get billed for that. So let's save you some money. Let's make sure when you're doing your initial searches, you're asking, have you ever been injured before? Have you ever hurt your back before? And identify the prior claims, identify the information. So that way, when you are sending all this information over to your doctor, it's going to help you focus on help them focus on certain things. So for instance, we talked about this earlier. This was a prior claims history that we found where this injured worker had all these different claims, okay? But what was critical here, and for those of you that have used our services, you'll know, we want to know where they're currently treated. That way we don't have to call them. We already know. And the top three places you see there, Concentra, True Neurology, and SoCal Med Services, those are all lien claimants on prior claims. So we already knew, because there was a lien, right, Diane? You know, if they're filing a lien on a prior work comp claim, you think they got records there?
I'm guessing they do.
I'm thinking they do too. So you can get your record company started right away. You can, you know, get them from the WCAB, or you can just send your record company straight out to these three lien doctors and get the prior claims history. Because again, they denied they have any prior claims. And we found all of this information to include personal auto. which is critical with the general release form that Diane just mentioned, because now you can get a copy of that medical or that accident report, and you can find out. And here's a little tip of the day. We didn't practice this one, Diane, but here's a good tip of the day. What would we find on a police accident report, maybe, Diane, that has to do with medical records?
Well, you know, there's probably an ambulance that rolled up to the scene.
Whoa, you think?
Yeah.
You think it's going to say where they took the patient?
I'm thinking, yes, let's get those records. If it's an auto accident, it happened on the job, let's get those records. Let's find out what the ambulance company had to say, what treatment was done while they were in the AMBO.
You got to think, you know, it's investigations. You follow the lead. And again, there are multiple ways to look at this. A personal auto with injury, where do they go?
You know, they might say something along the lines of, gee, the patient says they're not injured, they're fine, they're not experiencing any problems, you know, but the employer wanted them taken to the hospital to be, you know, checked over, right? So
Yeah.
now all of a sudden, when, you know, three months later, they were terribly injured, right? But that's not what the ambulance records say.
Right, that's right. Quickly, social media. Social media is an incredible tool right now. More and more people are on there. You know, my parents in their 80s, they don't know how to use it, but God bless them, they're trying. They'll have conversations in the open page forum. It's a great thing. But people love to check in at medical facilities. We also talk about Yelp reviews. Did your injured worker previously post a comment about their chiropractor and how much they recommend their chiropractor, but yet they denied prior treatment or injuries to you, yet they've been seeing a chiropractor at, you know, Dr. Schmuckatelli's DC for the last 20 years and can't say anything better about him, right? Well, it was on a Yelp review, and you find that. And here's a quick example. You know, this guy loved his burgers. It was either In-N-Out or JB Burger, but boy, I'm sure he has a cardiologist on his speed dial. But he also checked into all these medical facilities. There were some in December of 2017. There's some stuff in August of 2017, a little July 2017. This was all on a public social media page that we found. Now, what do you think, Diane? Should you maybe go make some football? Before I ask you that question, remember how I said validate it's the right person? Because we don't know if he treated there, or maybe it was a child or a family member. Maybe they have really good hamburgers in the cafeteria at all these places. I don't know. Let's call first. Let's call these places. Let's find out if it was him and when he treated. We're not asking what he was treated for, because, you know, we don't have a HIPAA form, which we'll talk about in a second. But let's make sure it's him. So that way we can stick Diane and MacroPro out there and go get those records, right, Diane? How easy is that?
I think the thing to keep in mind, Chris, is a lot of times when people have injury at work, they're not thinking about all the times that they go to these other clinics that are nearby their homes for whatever reason. So it's not necessarily that they're trying not to tell you that they've been treated there before. They just may not think it's necessary for you to be aware of it, or that it doesn't apply to your particular situation. So it would be good to find out why they are there, because maybe it's a matter of something got aggravated in the claim based off of something that they went to see urgent care for.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely. Remember, we're here to help. We're with the government. We're here to help. No, you're trying to get them the best treatment they can, the possible outcome, right, Diane? We're trying to help them on their road to recovery.
Exactly.
So we're kind of wrapping up here, but this is something that we look for when we're doing our when we're setting up our cases here. And any investigative firm that you're working with, make sure that you have this information, and when you make your referral, send this to them. If they choose not to use it, that's up to them. But when we're doing our searches, this is what we're looking for. First of all, do you have that release form? Either the one Diane talked about, the general release form, a HIPAA release form, or the form that has their medical history, or what's the saying, Diane? Medical provider?
Medical history form.
Yeah, medical history form. Because that way we can exclude those locations. We can exclude calling them. We already know that. So if you have a release form, send it to your investigations company. So a lot of times they're going to say, hey, do you have a release form? We can fax it to them, email it to them. That way they're more likely to tell us, what they have. Secondly,
Right.
again, like I said, the name of current medical facilities, the date of injury, people. We need the date of injury, because that way we can kind of focus in on which ones matter, which ones don't. We're trying to find records prior to the date of injury or records after, if you didn't know about it already. And finally, the index report, if you had one, send it over. We'll take a look at it, and that way it'll help us narrow down our search results. So finally, I guess that's kind of it, Diane. I would say, do we have any questions? I haven't seen any pop up.
No, there are some questions, and I'll let Drew ask them. Although there was one that was a good comment that was made. It says an easier way to ask about someone being married in the past is, have you ever gone by any other name? And that is true. That is short, sweet, to the point. So excellent point, Rebecca. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
so Drew, I think there's a question, right?
And that was the question that I saw from Rebecca, and I refreshed it and it snuck away from my screen, and I did not see any other questions on my list unless somebody else saw something different, but nothing.
Yeah, there's another one here, and the question is whether or not they can use an existing authorization form on a new claim for the same claimant. I'm not an attorney, but I would think if you ask permission, you would be able to utilize it. And I wouldn't use it unbeknownst to them, because I'm not an attorney. I would check with your defense attorney to verify whether or not, if it's a different body part and a different claim, you may have to have them sign a separate authorization form. But if you ask them, I would imagine that you'd be able to utilize the same one because they gave permission for that.
Well,
Diane, I got a question texted to me by a friend of mine who's on the call right now. They asked me, Chris, how many facilities do you look for? And is there a charge difference on the number of searches you do? Thank you, Bill. That's a really good question. I appreciate you asking. We try to search for at least 15 facilities around the provided address or a developed address. We try to focus on urgent care centers, hospitals, or emergency rooms. Depending on the type of injury it is, we can spread that out. But we do try to focus in on a 15 is kind of the magic number. If there are more than that in a condensed location, then obviously we'll talk to you. And so that's kind of what we do. We don't charge too much for our searches. I know that there are some different companies out there that have different fee schedules for how many different searches. There are 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, you get the hint. We just charge a flat rate. It's kind of similar to what we do with our background investigations, and try to give you as much as we can. I in all fairness, we trying to help, and we're not going to bill you a hell of a lot for it. So thanks again for that question. Diane, if there aren't any more, I think we got everything we needed here, right?
Yes, and I just want to thank you, Diane, and thank you, Chris, for sharing your insights with us today. I just want to ask Diane first, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners this morning?
Oh, well, let's see here. I think the most important thing to remember is that we are still, unfortunately, in the middle of a pandemic. Although we are seeing things clear up, records are still taking longer than normal in some facilities and some locations. So just be patient. I don't care who your document retrieval company is. I promise you that we are all experiencing the same slowdowns.
Oh, very good. And you, Chris, any final thoughts for our listeners this morning?
Just get on it right away. I know you got a lot of cases. I know a lot of people have been laid off with the pandemic, and your probably caseloads doubled. We're here to help. Companies like Diane and mine, we work together to get you what you need. I'll even make the referrals directly to Diane, or vice versa. We work together on this stuff, and I think more vendors should be doing that these days to help you expedite a lot of this stuff.
Great. Well, thank you, Chris. And Drew, any final thoughts for our listeners?
Just again, just want to remind everybody to look out for their certificates, and go along with the theme. We all miss seeing everyone in person. We do have lots of hope that this is going to come together where we're going to be able to see each other again in the not so distant future. And I hope that everybody stays healthy and safe out there, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event.